when I joined Amazon, I joined to launch Alexa into the Amazon app. Doing a startup or doing a side project, maybe, is something everyone should try
Yeah.
because you learn so much doing it that you wouldn't in a normal job because your normal job is like quite narrowly defined. A lot of people do an MBA, for instance. They do software engineering, they do an MBA, then they move in.
Hmm.
Or they've done a business degree and maybe they add on some coding and they go try to become a product manager. I'd say the MBA is not necessary. I don't have an MBA. I think you need to be a bit delusional to start a startup because you
Mm.
need to believe so strongly that this
Hmm.
should exist. Why doesn't this exist?
Hmm. Hmm.
That, statistically and logically, you know that the risk for failure is really high.
Yeah.
But, you need to believe in yourself and the idea so
True.
highly that you can't imagine not going and working on it.
Hmm. Hmm. Hello everyone and welcome to a new video from Careers Talks with Tamer, where I chat with professionals about their daily job responsibilities, their career paths, and how they manage to land their jobs. If there is someone to define what a versatile career is, it's the guest of this episode, Angela. Angela just left her job as a seasoned technical product manager at Amazon, where she incorporated Alexa into the Amazon shopping app. Angela didn't start her career as a product manager. She started as a software engineer, where she worked at top firms like Cisco and Morgan Stanley. However, she was keen on landing a role that had more stakeholder management, and hence she shifted to product management. She also went through numerous experiences in her career, like opening her own startup, teaching product management and web development, and also working as a freelancer. In this episode, she shares a lot of insights and career lessons from her different experiences. So I hope you'll find this video insightful. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. How are you, Angela, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tamer. Yeah, I'm great, and thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast today.
Yes.
Was really excited both to be invited and also when you told me about it the first time that you're doing this podcast. I think it's very much needed because the transition from being a student to starting work can be quite a shocking one.
Shocking one indeed. Yes, I agree. I agree. I think also your career path is very, very interesting. You started in super technical roles, but you tried everything: entrepreneurship, product management, freelancing. So I think there's a lot to touch on in terms of your career. Your last role was as a technical product manager at Amazon, and you recently left that as well. So we'll touch on that. What I'd really love to know and start with is you've tried all these different roles. You started in software engineering roles, you moved to product management, you went to entrepreneurship, and then back to being a senior technical product manager at Amazon. Walk me a bit through these different roles and specifically the motivation behind these decisions. Like, okay, now I'm done with being a software engineer. What's next for me? I want to go to product management. Now I want to try to open a startup, which is a very different, journey and it needs a different mindset. So would love to know about the decisions you've made there and the motivation behind these decisions.
Yeah, super happy to talk about this. I very much see our careers as a journey rather than a goal to get to a specific endpoint.
Hmm.
And I've been working for over 10 years now. And so when I started out and I was in upper secondary school, kind of ready to make my choices for university, at the time, we had these massive tech companies really changing the world. You had
Yes.
Google came in, Facebook, Amazon, completely changed both what we thought of as what a company does. You
Hmm.
could show up in a t-shirt, it's
Hmm.
these really cool cultures, but also it's completely changing how people communicate,
Yes.
how we order products online, how you read books through, say, your Kindle. Um, and it just really caught my attention. I was like, this is a really cool place to go change the world.
Hmm.
And so originally I kind of planned to do more of like a joint business type degree. And then I quite quickly changed my outlook to do in software engineering instead, because most of the founders of these companies were software engineers. They'd
Correct.
done computer science and then they started doing these companies because then they knew how to build it.
Hmm.
Um, and so decided to go study in London at Imperial College,
Hmm.
which was amazing. They have a really, really good computing degree with really good partnerships with key companies across London. Most of the really big software companies have headquarters in London as well. And so when we were in the second year, for instance, Google emailed all the girls in our department to ask if we wanted to come and interview for internships. So I
Wow.
was able to do one of my first internships at Google in London, which was amazing. So there I was able to kind of come in. I was able to actually build out a small internal product. I
Nice.
worked on a sales support team, and they had issues with ticket resolution times. And so we built out this product where instead of kind of people filing tickets and they like reply to the tickets, it was a Google Hangouts call. So you could just join a queue, you would see someone doing a video call, and the resolution times are much quicker. People are much happier. And I kind of got to lead that project, and that was, super exciting. So I would say like through university, my first internship type career impressions. Computing was very much a thing where you come in and you have some cool idea and you build it. And
Hmm.
Imperial is very much the same. It's like a very hands-on degree. And
That's
so we built
important.
so much software during that time. We built
Mm.
operating systems, we built apps, we built everything. And then you start work. And I'm sure you've had the same thing. Like you start work and it's very different.
Hmm.
Because when you do an
Hmm.
internship, they give you a standalone project, so you can't break
Yes.
anything.
Yeah.
You start work and they're like, can you fix this bug? Can you
Yeah.
deal with this little thing? Can you add this little feature? And you're like, oh, software engineering is very different than I thought it was.
Correct.
And so I quickly realized that what I loved about tech wasn't necessarily the coding itself, it was
Oh.
kind of solving customer problems
Hmm.
and actually building out and launching products.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so that's kind of when I started making that change. And we go back about 10 years, product management was just kind of starting to
Yes.
become a field. And I remember I
Hmm.
was reading a job posting from Airbnb, and they were like looking for, because they were one of the first companies started doing product management. They had this job posting for product managers. It talked about all the different responsibilities of this role, and I was like, this
Hmm.
sounds great. This is like exactly what I want to do. And so I basically made that choice to go pursue product management rather than pure software engineering.
Nice. That's very interesting. And I think there's like an element of risk, right? Because this field was just starting. And I think
Mm.
it's very brave of you that you decided, you know what, I want to not be very on like very super technical, and I want to explore this new field. So I think it's always about risks that you take in your career that also
Mm.
move you to the next level. Because if you're really risk
Yes.
averse, you'll definitely have a growth path, but it will be very different from one where you're willing to explore new stuff. At least that personally, I felt helped me a lot. Where if you're want to explore something new, it always takes you to this new level as compared to the slow growth of just like, oh yeah, I'll be promoted as a software engineer and then continue down that line. So I think that's a very good transition you've made. And you've also, after you started with product management, you started your own startup called Proximy Style, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes, that's
where
correct.
basically you saw like if where you can see your size in different stores and how far are these stores from you.
Mhm.
Not sure if I'm describing it correctly, but you'll add on now a bit more on that. How did you decide? Because that's also a very higher level of risk that we're talking about. So you decided to leave corporate completely
Yeah.
and move to entrepreneurship. So what was the motivation behind that decision specifically?
Yeah, I think so. The really big benefit of having that engineering background is your ability to just learn really well
Mm.
because things are always changing and just get your hands dirty and just build stuff.
Hmm.
And so I kind of ran into what is probably a bit of a luxury problem, but as a young professional working in London, you spend a lot of your time going out to parties on the weekends, but you also spend most of your day sitting in the office.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of struggling with this problem of I'm going out to a party on the weekend. I have nothing to wear. It's like say a themed event. You have to show up in a black dress, but it's the middle of July. Where you're going to find a black dress? Everyone sells
Mm.
summer clothes. And so I was like, there must be a better way of doing this because I got really tired of getting, boxes of clothes sent to my office. Nothing fits because women's sizing is all over the place.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Then queuing at my, 30-minute lunch break to hand it back at the post office with everyone else who'd also been out online shopping. I was working in the middle of London, right? So there's shops everywhere. You can easily just pop in during your lunch break, try some stuff on if you just know where to go.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise you can easily spend an entire Sunday or Saturday walking up all of Oxford Street and Regent Street, looking from store to store to store, trying to find something. And I've done that way too many times. I might should too much. And so I decided to make proximity style. And proximity style basically helps you find products near you, like you said. So say you want to buy, a black cocktail dress in July. You'll just search for black cocktail dress. It will show you all the black cocktail dresses sold by brands near you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I might look at it and be like, okay, Hobbs has a really good cocktail dress. Let me run down there and buy that.
Nice.
And so we partnered with over 100 different brands in London. We got the attention of Y Combinator. We were on their startup school. They flew us out to talk to all their partners in Silicon Valley. And they gave us a grant because they really believed in what we were doing and the speed that we were operating at and launching new features and improving our product every day. And we also ended up being part of a startup incubator run by the London College of Fashion and University of Arts, which is really, really cool. It was like super exclusive, and like 6 startups in London got to be part of it.
Nice.
And we were talking to all the people who were, running fashion here. So that's amazing, honestly. I wouldn't have been without this experience. Obviously, you're taking a bit of a financial step back.
Risk,
because working in a big company or a big corporate, you have a very solid income.
Yes.
And if you start working in a startup, even if it's for yourself and you have some money coming into the startup, the person you pay last is typically yourself.
Yes.
So I was lucky that, I'd worked in finance and other industries for a bit. So I had money saved up to be able to take that bet. I also have a bunch of other friends who were doing startups as well. And they had really good luck. I went to Antler. I have a few friends who went to Entrepreneur first. I think the really big benefit in going through some of these startup incubators at some point during your career is you get to meet this like really large group of people who are super passionate about solving some problems.
Yeah.
They have a wide variety of backgrounds. They're really passionate. You'd never meet them otherwise, and you never know where they're going to end up. Some will go back to corporate, some will start a really big company, but you'll make this amazing network of people who were going through a hard hustle time at the same time as you. So I really,
100%.
really recommend that.
Yes. And were you not worried about making, when you started the startup, were you not worried about, what if it fails? How did you deal with these thoughts and emotions of I'm taking a big risk, I'm leaving my corporate job? What was your number one motivational reason, let's say?
I think you need to be a bit delusional to start a startup because you need to believe so strongly that this should exist. Why doesn't it exist? That, statistically and logically, that the risk for failure is really high.
Yeah.
But, you need to believe in yourself and the idea so highly that you can't imagine not going and working on it. For most people listening, I probably really recommend if you have really good ideas you want to try out, start them on the side.
Yes.
But make sure you check your contracts wherever you are, whether you're in university or you are working in a job. Often your contract will tell you if you can work on things on the side and what the ownership of that will be. Some companies will say, feel free to have a side project. Just make sure it doesn't compete with our main business.
Yes.
But some contracts will say, we own absolutely all your IP, including if you write, a song. and put it on Spotify. So just make sure you check that before you go do something.
Correct, yeah. And some even ask you to declare anything you have on the side as well as part of
Exactly, exactly. And that's good practice of it
ethics.
anyway,
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
doing something on the side. I know typically for engineering, having and design as well, having a portfolio of things you've been doing as side projects
Yes.
is a really good way of getting that next job. They often look at your GitHub, they look at your portfolio, talking about your project is a good way of showing that you're passionate about the field, you're learning extra things. So in many ways, it's seen as a positive. Until it starts potentially impacting what you're doing at work, and then they're like, "Oh, are you spending too much time on the side?"
Yes, yeah,
So you just need
yeah,
to be careful with how you pitch it and the time commitments. But I've had colleagues in the past who work a 4-day week, for instance, and spend one day running a
yeah.
business with a friend or their spouse. So you can definitely negotiate these things coming in as well,
Correct.
or while you're there. So
Yeah,
don't be
no,
afraid to do
definitely.
it, but starting it on the side or finding the customers before you quit is a good way of limiting the risk.
The risk, yes, yes.
Mm,
And then moving to that last part, because I
yeah.
have a question separate on your most recent career
Hmm.
decision of leaving Amazon, but I
Yeah.
just want to go back to from entrepreneurship back to corporate.
Yeah.
How was that, and how did you decide like, okay, now it's time to go back to a corporate job?
Yeah. So we ran the startup for a while. Like we struggled to make the unit economics and ROI really
Hmm.
worth it. I think especially when you come from a job where you're like fairly well paid, or when you
Yes.
work in like finance or tech or something like that, over time, the ROI of running your own startup might not be worth it if you haven't
Hmm.
had exponential growth very quickly. And so, although we were signing loads of partnerships and having tons of really positive feedback,
Hmm.
making
Hmm.
the unit economics work is quite difficult.
Yes.
And so I basically decided to go back to corporate.
Hmm.
Also, so I was really interested in trying to go to a big company to work with cutting edge AI
Yeah.
technology. I wanted to try working on like a really big global team
Yes.
because most of the companies I worked in before had been more London or London/US based, but this was a really good opportunity to go work on like a super global team. So I joined Amazon.
Hmm.
This was kind of still during COVID lockdowns and remote working.
Yeah.
And I'd actually say it was probably the perfect time to join a big global company because everyone is remote.
Hmm.
So it actually felt like we're all in the
Oh,
same place.
yeah.
It's such an amazing experience. You'll be hard pressed to find it in a startup because you're just a few people usually, quickly you'd be like maybe 20 people. You're like hustling, you're wearing 20 hats. You might do that also in a corporate to some extent, but it's a very different ballgame.
No, that definitely makes sense. It's definitely a different environment, and we're gonna come to that. In terms of like all looking back at all of this journey, what would you say were like your key learnings that like career lessons, let's say?
I would say there's like three really big learnings. The first one is like do your job with a high attention to detail. This might sound like table stakes, but you'd be surprised at how many people don't come into their job with a high attention to detail.
Yeah.
And that might be, you'll see it frequently with certain types of engineering who are just coming into front end design, for instance, and they don't have a good visual sense of design, and they'll be like, "I finished coding this thing up," and you're like, "It looks nothing like the design." High attention to detail there, spot the five differences. Or it might be, to be a project manager, but you keep missing things off the list of things that need to be done or missing
Yeah.
deadlines. There's a lot of things that are just like easily done and you progress quite nicely by just having high attention to detail. It will mostly make you get along really well with your colleagues.
Hmm.
Uh, you won't annoy anyone by like just delivering. And that's a good baseline to just like show up and do well in your job. High
Correct.
attention to detail. The second one is, consistently communicate that you're making progress.
Hmm.
And I've seen this across multiple places at work. People have a tendency to pick up some task. It's a big, big task. And you can end up, whether you're an engineer or in product management or operation or something else, with this big task on your task board and it's like never moving. And eventually your leadership's like, are you not doing anything? Are you making no progress? And so a really good thing you can do here is like split things into small achievable tasks that
Yeah.
you can make progress. Always show you're making progress. Ideally split it down to a way where like you can easily tick something off or move it along like every day or every week. That way, that's like a small enough unit of time that you're clearly making progress. Otherwise, leadership or your manager or someone else will start questioning like what's happening here.
Hmm.
And I have a good friend as well who's kind of more on the operational side, and her advice is, pick up a small task, show that you can complete that well, then pick up the second slightly bigger task, show you can complete that well. And that way, it's a good way of like, slowly building trust that you can deliver stuff, move things along. You'll get more responsibility because you're able to complete the tasks that you're given,
Hmm. Hmm.
rather than trying to go the other way, picking up the biggest possible thing, not showing progress, and people are like, "What's happening?" Um, that's the second advice,
Yeah.
and the third piece of advice is that work is all about the people. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter what role you're in, how big or small the company is. If
True.
you're two people, if you're 2 million people in the
Hmm.
company, it's all about the people.
Yes.
If you're a nice person to work with, people will want to work with you. If you
Correct.
bring your positive mood and enthusiasm to work, even on the hardest, especially as a product manager, even when you're like, oh, this thing is like not going the right direction, you have to try to bring that positive enthusiasm to
Yes.
work, because you need to motivate the people you're with. They need to be excited to work with you. They need to feel like it's going in the right direction. And often it is like as soon as like one person starts showing up being a bit like, they're like a bit like demotivated, a bit down, a bit negative, that mood can like very quickly spread around the team.
True.
And so, make sure you're like a positive influence there. And also, invariably at work, things might not go according to plan. You know, Someone might have missed something. There might be an issue with the launch and these things.
Yeah.
Make sure if anything does go wrong, bring it up, in a nice way with people on a one-on-one
Yes.
basis. Don't hang people out to dry in a
Yeah.
group meeting.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not going to win you friends. So
No, great, great insight, especially the last one. Like I always try to remind myself, like we're all human beings that we're working together. So just be friendly and things happen, as you said. If there's a problem, just say why
yeah,
it happened, how are you fixing it, and then you move from there. People are usually understanding in most cases, I would say. So I think a lot of young professionals now that start their career in, let's say, very technical roles, try to make the shift to more roles that involve more stakeholder management. And you've made that shift, right, from
hmm,
very technical roles at Cisco and Morgan Stanley to
yeah,
these product roles. So, can you tell us more of how you made that shift? And if someone's listening there that's interested in making that shift,
yeah.
like what steps can they follow to be able to enter enter product management, basically?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad you brought it up. So I would say the best way to make that move is ideally if you're already in a company that has a product function, try to see if there's a way for you to start picking up some product work on the side. We've
Hmm.
had that with multiple of my colleagues at work, whether they were in data science or software engineering or something else.
Hmm.
They had a chat with their manager indicating an interest to try out products. And what we did is we gave them some small pieces of
Hmm.
projects to own so they could try it out. And, actually a lot of people try it and they say they really don't like it because it's a very different type of working.
Yes.
It's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of decision making, it's a lot of ambiguity, it's a lot of stakeholder management, there's a lot of writing, especially at Amazon.
Hmm.
And so we had a few people, we had a data scientist, for instance, who tried it and he was like, I don't like it. It's
Yeah.
too much decision making. I'm used to this compiling report. I don't like it. So he went back and decided to become a manager, but stay within the data science space, for
Yeah.
instance, instead.
Yeah.
Um, because it's not for everyone, but I think it's a really nice way of trying it out. Because as long as you've agreed with your manager, you're still keeping your main role. You're being evaluated on your main role, but you get to try it out a bit.
Yes.
Another good way as well, once you kind of have that alignment with your manager, that you can spend some time on this is, speak to the product person that might belong to your team, or if you don't have a product function, be proactive. A lot of product is being proactive and coming up with ideas for like products we could do or improvements we could make. So if you're in tech, that might be, hey, here are some improvements we can make to our system. It might be like, a major like redesign to improve latency. It might be a shift to like improving some of the internal tech. It might be making internal tools to make things better. Or it might be features for the customers based on some feedback you've heard. You can kind of pitch those and be like, hey, is it okay if I run this project, for instance? And ideally this is like a smaller project. You don't want to take on a massive thing if it's just your part-time project. But that's a really good way of dipping your toe in, seeing if you like it. If you kind of team up with your product manager a bit as well, you can probably get them to mentor you a bit, make sure you're doing the right thing. And that way you have a really good support network helping you get in there.
100%.
You can obviously go the other way as well, which is like, a lot of people do an MBA, for instance. They do software engineering, they do an MBA, then they move in. Or they've done a business degree and maybe they add on some coding and they go try to become a product manager. I'd say the MBA is not necessary. I don't have an MBA.
Yeah.
And, you might take an MBA, but then maybe do it for different reasons, to learn more about business, to make you also good friends. It's still worth it, but it's not necessary.
Yes.
And it's very costly because you're taking a 2-year career break and spending a lot of money. You also don't need to know how to code. You need to understand how tech products are built.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean you need to know how to code necessarily. Some of the best product managers we have in our office are extremely structured people who are like really good at communicating. They are not coming from a coding background, but they typically have, either a technical degree or a business degree. One of those two things. But your communication skills is really the main thing you need
as a
product manager. Yeah, and then a really good relationship with your engineering manager, because the two of you together will be, making your roadmaps and planning out what's launching.
Yes.
I think those are kind of the main things.
Yeah, I think a lot of people always have that question of, oh, do I need a degree in computer science to work in product management? And the answer is no. As you said, like you could come from a business background but have some technical exposure, and then you can enter into a product management. And then if you become exposed to more technical aspects, you can even move to technical product management without a computer science degree, for example. And I think I really liked what you said in terms of data people shifting to product. Like you can always expose yourself more because you're the engine of producing insights. And definitely these insights are making it to some business team. So if you know who's consuming your insights and try to understand what's the process around your data and get exposed to that business process and business decisions that are around that data you're producing, then you're gaining that business acumen and these business skills that will allow you to say, actually, I produced this data, and based on this data, the recommendations are 1, 2, 3. So you start linking your technical role to the business decisions and processes around them. So that's actually a great tip, I think.
Yeah. One of my recent really good managers, he had a great way of kind of communicating some of these things. He always asks the question, he's like, okay, but what's the so what here, basically? And what he meant is like, especially when it came to some of the, reports people might put together, we've listened to customers, here are some of the issues they've come up with, or we've made a benchmarking report, here are some of the things we found, or data science has made a report, and like, here's where some of the latencies coming from, or here's like where people are dropping off. If people weren't good at coming up with like a section of like, here's the suggested next steps, you'd be like, okay, but what's your so what? You listed some problems, but like, based on your thinking, what do you actually recommend we do with this? And why should we do this? And why are these the best ones to do? Is this in the right order? I had a director that was always very strict on like, you listed some examples of what we could do. Is this strictly in your priority order, and how you're prioritizing these? And I definitely think these are things that we could all be doing regardless of our job function. Because,
Correct.
you're discovering a bug and you're an engineer, or a latency issue, or you're compiling data reports with insights of maybe where customers are dropping off and where there's opportunities. Taking that time to actually write out, here, based on my insights of where we should go next,
Yes.
is really often what separates like more of a junior to more of a senior employee.
Yes. And it's a skill you can develop, by the way. It's not
Yeah.
like when you start, maybe you struggle a bit with it, but the more you do it, the better you become at it, into translating these insights
Yeah.
into more of business related insights, not just purely
Exactly.
data. We'll shift more to technical product manager or product management specifically. You've worked on integrating AI into e-commerce and into Amazon, and you've worked with generative AI, language models, even voice integration within the app. So how do you think all these technologies are transforming the customer experience, transforming e-commerce? Your answer, that like you don't have to specifically touch on e-commerce in general or e-commerce specifically, up to you, but would love to know how these technologies are changing the customer experience.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So to give a bit more background, when I joined Amazon, I joined to launch Alexa into the Amazon app, which was made into like a mixed experience of voice and touch and visual experiences. It was a bit different than what you saw on your Alexa device sitting in your kitchen counter. And so we had to do a lot of kind of R&D innovation, like what does voice look like when you end up having it on a phone and it helping you shop in an existing app. Same with Amazon Rufus. I was a core part of the Amazon Rufus team from kind of early stages up to launching it. Amazon Rufus, for those who don't know, is Amazon's conversational AI. You can use it in the Amazon app to basically help you do research. Instead of having to go off and do your own research, you can ask questions like, what's the best air purifier for someone who has allergies? Or, what's a really good drone that takes really nice photos, but is easy to use? And there's loads of different functionalities there that are built out, but there was also, again, a mix kind of text and visual experience.
Yes.
So instead of just getting a text answer like you get from ChatGPT, you would actually get products coming back to you. So in all these instances, we mixed different mediums to make it a good and intuitive and seamless experience. I would say overall, based on both these experiences and what I did with my startup in the past, maybe don't try to be technology looking for a problem to solve. Think about the problems customers have today.
Yes.
And ideally build a business around that, solving that problem. And then AI is one of the many ways you can solve that problem. We had a good VP who would typically say, it was a really good AI expert, but he would typically say, your baseline should be what a good software engineer would do. And then you can add some AI on top, but don't just try to solve every problem with AI.
True. Yeah.
And so to kind of answer one of your questions, AI is just one of the many things in our toolbox as product managers. You can be, an AI product manager working at, on foundational models in some of these companies like OpenAI or Mistral or something like that. But for most companies out there, AI is just one of the many ways we look at solving customer problems. And also one of the best ways of using AI is where the customer don't even realize that the problem is being solved with AI, because it's so seamless. It just flows into the integration where they're already using it. A really good example of that, I think, is Amazon's summarized reviews. So if you go on your Amazon app and you click on any product, and you go down to reviews, it has this summary of what people are saying. And it says below the small text, like, this is generated by AI. And it even highlights the key benefits and the key downsides customers are saying. And that means you can very quickly read that one summary, because people go down to read the reviews anyway. Instead of you reading 20 reviews, you can read the summary and then a couple of reviews if you want to. saves customers time. They don't have to change any habits. So it seamlessly gets adopted.
Yeah, no, that's a good point that if the customer doesn't know you're using AI, then you're doing it well. And I
Mm,
think also it's true that if you start thinking of the technology before the problem, then you're missing the problem in the first place and you might not solve the
exactly.
problem. So that's a
Uh,
very good point. And all these like complex projects that you've worked on where, you know, before AI, Amazon was a regular app. The customer they were very used to this experience, and now
mm,
you're integrating another device that they like into another app that they use often.
yeah.
So there's a lot to think of across the journey and the different steps.
Mm,
When do we want to introduce this? Where in the page? Like, how
exactly.
did you think of like like how did you basically when you were faced by all these complex challenges, how did you
Yeah.
approach them basically, and what were these challenges in the first place, like the main ones, let's say?
Yeah, so I kind of to talk about it maybe like a bit in general as well.
Yes.
Um, typically my recommendation is always go talk to customer first to
Mm.
understand what their problem is. This
Yes.
always applies whether you're doing completely new business and you're trying to find new customers or you have an existing product. Understand what customers' pain points are, and then link anything you're pitching back to those pain points.
Hmm.
I would say often you'll figure out the main pain points by speaking to somewhere between like 3 and 5 people. Often even one person can be like, okay, clearly I have a problem here. Um, and so that will give you really good insights. Obviously, sometimes people might, you know, people might want something you don't realize that they want, but it often would link back to the same issue anyway, right?
Yeah.
To take a example that I haven't worked on, but we probably most of us have used, is like a Kindle, right?
Hmm.
Before the Kindle, I was one of the probably early adopters of buying a Kindle because I used to read a lot. I used to pack my suitcase going on holiday full of books because, like, if you go on holiday to say Spain or Italy, they won't be selling any English books
Yeah.
in the store, and so you bring everything you want on vacation with you. But I was quite a quick reader, so I packed my entire suitcase full of books. But now, if I go on holiday, I bring my Kindle, and I'm like, oh, I kind of want to read this thing, and I just download it, as I'm walking onto the plane or as I'm like lying on the beach. And especially given that luggage restrictions have become much more strict than they were
Yeah.
when I was young, I'm very thankful this type of technology exists. So, here you could link it back to a problem of like, I love reading. I'm going on holiday for 2 weeks. Do I put 10 kilos of books in my suitcase, or is there a better way of solving this
Yeah.
problem?
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's
Um,
definitely, yeah. No, there's a lot changing in terms of how the customer experience is
mm,
evolving, and then what I'd like to also maybe touching on the specifics of the product management
mm,
role.
yeah.
Uh, how did you, like, if you can walk us actually through a day in the life in general, and how did that involve managing stakeholders? There's a lot of people you need to talk to, the
Mm.
customers, the internal teams, the technical teams, even sometimes sales. So was it like a structured thing? If you can walk us through your role and how you managed all these stakeholders.
Yeah, it really, really depends on the size of company you're in,
True.
and where in the phase of your product you're in.
Yeah.
I'll start with a probably like an easier example, which is
Mhm.
a startup I was helping out with a product launch. It was
Yes.
a smaller startup, and we were pre-launch, we were kind of in a beta. And so what we did is we basically worked on effectively 1 week long sprints. Because in a
Hmm.
startup, you can move a lot faster than you can in a big corporate.
Hmm.
Um, so what we would do is we would talk to customers on every Thursday. We'd call up a bunch of our beta customers. We'd ask them, how they've been using the app, if they had any issues, what they would thought of the experience, and we'd show them some new ideas for that we were thinking of doing that we've been like mocking up in Figma.
Nice.
We take that feedback, summarize it, we give it back to the engineers on the Friday, feed it back, update the new roadmap. On the Monday, the engineers would like start working on the new changes. And we would also start mocking up a new iteration of designs
Yeah.
that we would again then test with customers on Thursday. So on
Hmm.
Thursdays, the customers would both get a new version of the app, and they would see a potential next iteration using just like UI mocks basically. So that's how we iterated quickly when I was in a startup.
Hmm.
At Amazon, you go through different, or like at any big company, you go through different phases.
Yes.
You have the phase where you're pitching a project to be like, hey, we should totally get funding to do this. It's a great idea. Amazon is a document writing culture.
Hmm.
You write a lot of pitch documents in document form. And the reason we do documents is it helps you like really crystallize your thinking. When someone's pitching a presentation, you can be kind of swayed by, how good they are at presenting, but you really
Hmm.
have to write it down. You know, what we do is we'll come into a meeting, we read that document, and then we discuss, and that makes sure that everyone has kind of consumed the same content. It's not swayed by how good you are at presenting.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, you would typically, you meet with your leadership to convince them that this idea is a good idea and needs to get funding. And then because it's big companies, you would typically set goals to get everyone that you need to work on this aligned towards the same goal, which is really important,
Hmm.
especially their leaders. Um, and then you'll work with your engineering counterparts to make
Yeah.
roadmaps. This is a typical thing you do even after you've launched. A lot of corporates work on like 2-week cycles in
Yeah.
terms of engineering. So you'll do a 2-week sprint. And that's also because the tech tends to be much more complex because you've only built up something over, 10 or 20 or 30 years. There's a lot of layers of technology there. There's a lot of layers required to get something pushed to production. You impact millions of customers. So 2-week cycle is a fairly common one. You work with your engineering counterpart and make roadmaps
Hmm.
to clearly outline, what we're doing over the next few weeks, but also, and that might be specific tasks with
Hmm.
engineers typically. But then, what does it look like for the month, for the quarter? What does it
Oh,
look like
wow.
across all our different work streams? Because typically, both your engineering team will own multiple different work streams of products.
Yes.
And you as a product manager will typically own a suite of products as well.
Yes.
At least I did as a senior product manager. And so I'll be making roadmaps with all my relevant engineering teams.
Mm.
And then often I have project managers who come in and they actually sync roadmaps across teams to make sure all the
Ah,
teams are working on things at the right time. So one team doesn't finish something and the other team hasn't started.
yeah, yeah,
And they
yeah.
make
That
sure
makes
that,
sense.
if there's like 5 teams needed to ship something that all need to impact it, they all work at the same time and it's like shipped on, say, the 31st of March.
Yeah.
Um, then once you have, you'll go through a lot of processes to get things launched, but once you launch, you might also have a lot of time spent stakeholder management in terms of, I get a lot of people come to me because we have a lot of features that are customer facing. So they might be like, hey, can I do this and this thing with your feature? Especially when it's an AI-based feature, you
Hmm.
can technically add a lot of functionality to that, but not necessarily changing the visuals too much. And so it's like, hey, can I make this AI feature also do this thing? Or can I add a feature that does this thing? And so you spend a lot of time kind of doing office hours, talking to people, discussing roadmaps, evaluating if, is it the right thing for the feature to also be doing this? Does it align with our goals for the year? You spend a lot of time talking to people. I spend most of my day in meetings, back-to-back
Yeah.
meetings. When I log on to, I log off basically, or answering emails.
And it's really tough because you also need to do all the work and all the writing after all these calls. So it's a very
Yeah.
demanding role. And it's also very interesting that difference between when you described how the cycles work in a startup versus how they work in a big corporate, because they both need to move efficiently and they're actually competing with one another in a way, but then the way the information is just passed down across the stakeholders in how you describe it at Amazon, that you even need a
Yeah.
project manager to come and make sure that the work stream is working well and there's some
Yeah.
synchronization between the teams. So it's just crazy how different it is. But in the startup, you just agree on something, you
Mm.
implement it, and then
Yeah.
you get that direct customer feedback. So it's interesting. And I think that's a good, sorry, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was going to say that even in a startup, you can quickly run into the problem of like the machinery is heavy to move. So there's
Mm.
quite a lot of startups that hire a bit too quickly before they've necessarily gone to market or found good product market fits. And then suddenly you have like 50 employees, but you're deciding to do something else.
Mm.
And then you have to, potentially reorg it. You have to maybe change who the people are, because you're changing, for instance, from a sales-led organization to a product-led organization,
True.
or something else. And so it doesn't take very many people to start moving a bit more slowly.
Mm.
So the fastest spaces are probably like 10 people.
Yeah.
Past that, it's you lose things in communications.
True. True.
You have to align a lot of interests. People get a little bit territorial to their spaces.
Yeah.
Everyone want to make sure that anyone they manage has enough things to do. So it's you don't need to be working in a group of 10,000 people to run into some of these issues actually.
Yeah, that's a very good insight. It could be 50 and you're even less efficient than two, three teams working together at Amazon because they've already been there in 50 stage and they figured out how to be efficient as they grow. And I think that's a good leeway or like the way to shift into entrepreneurship and innovation. I think in terms of, because you built your own startup,
Yeah.
but you started in corporate jobs first. Did you
Yeah.
struggle a bit with your way you were building in terms of, I'm thinking the corporate way, I need to shift to startup mode. Like, was that a challenge you faced?
I think the biggest challenge I face is probably that you're really used to a lot of things just existing around you that you take for
Mm,
granted.
mm,
I was fairly junior before I left corporate, so you're a bit shielded, especially like as a junior engineer or product manager. You mostly deal with just like tasks you're given to some
yeah.
extent, um, and so it's not as much of like the big corporate influence machine.
Hmm.
But the biggest thing is that in all these companies, you're just used to things existing. So, when I went off on my own to launch an app, I was used to shipping software by like clicking one button, and then there's an entire infrastructure team that deals with like our entire cloud system center. We had giant data centers, we had an entire team that was actually responsible for launching anything that you said you wanted to launch. You just filled in a form and you're like, I'm going to launch this thing today. And they're like, okay, I'll go do that. Um, or you just pushed your code and merged it and someone else was launching it. And then when you're doing your own thing, you're like, oh, okay, so I built this thing on my computer, but like, how do I get it to people? And that's actually a surprising amount of work. So I ended up having to like do all these research and like what are the best cloud computing solutions.
Mm.
Ended up building out this whole AWS infrastructure to host everything. Might be a bit overkill. Don't scale too
Yeah.
soon. It's also an important lesson.
Yeah.
And these things are much easier today than they were back then. Um, and there's just all these things that are completely invisible to you in a large company that
Yes.
you take for granted. And when you're on your own, you're like, oh, I have to do this. Um,
Yeah, that's
so I actually think doing a startup or doing a side project, maybe, is something everyone should try
yeah.
because you learn so much doing it that you wouldn't in a normal job because your normal job is like quite narrowly defined. And so it's an amazing learning opportunity.
I
Even if it's just
agree.
a side project you do with a friend, and that can be anything. It doesn't have to be tech. One of my friends runs a small side project company where she, collects items for as a charity
Mm.
to hand out to homeless people, for instance. That
Yes.
still has a reasonable amount of like running a business,
True.
logistics, operations, all these things. So she's picking up loads of really good skills.
Yeah.
So there can be anything, and it can fuel your passions.
No, I could really relate to this, right? Because you're starting a company, and even as like, because a podcast is not as complex, but yet, if you really want to grow it and connect to this
Yeah.
community around it, it's actually like a small company, right? Because you need
Mm.
marketing and you need to think of the
Yeah.
growth of the podcast, and then you need some video editing. So
Yeah.
that's a podcast. But if you're actually building a tech company, then that's
Yeah.
like also a different level of how
Yeah.
much small details you need to build yourself that are in
Mm.
super different teams, marketing, sales, get talking to
Exactly.
investors. So you need to put numerous hats and just try to, do everything simultaneously, which can be overwhelming. But as you said, I think you really should try it, whether it's building a startup or any side project.
It's good to think about what problem you're solving before solving it, because especially anyone coming from an engineering background, I think, can easily have a tendency to just be like, I just know how to build it. I'm just going to go
Yeah,
build this thing. This is a cool technology. Let me go try it. And you kind of lose the forest for the trees in a bit, where, you know, you're just making stuff because it's cool, and you're not thinking about like, why am I making this?
true. And I think you can be a great at building products, but then how would you convince the customer to use them, and how would you convince the
Yeah.
customer to that they need this is also a completely different problem that you have
Mm,
to deal with. So if you're good at building but you're not good at selling, then that's
yeah,
another issue you have
exactly.
to face. What I'd love to know is like you decided to pause that entrepreneurial journey and then go
Mm,
back to corporate. How
yeah.
did that feel like? Do you have any regrets, or when you started your job at Amazon, where you're like, oh, I wish I went back to that, where you're like in a startup environment, or not
Mm.
really?
I don't have any regrets. I love both my startup journey, and I had the best time at Amazon.
Hmm.
It was an amazing opportunity to be able to go and launch products to reach hundreds of millions of customers globally.
Yeah,
You know, being able to do that as a startup is, you might be able to grow your startup to get there, but being able to reach customers globally for such a well-known brand is such a unique opportunity.
correct.
And it was something I kind of felt like I was missing from my CV as well.
Hmm.
Being able to do that in a consumer-facing AI shopping, and
Hmm.
it's ticked all
Hmm.
my boxes. Very much a dream job. But yeah, I wouldn't be against doing another thing in the future in terms of like another startup or small business, or even some side projects. But yeah,
We'll we'll
we'll
touch
touch on
on that.
that.
We'll touch on that indeed. Yes, yes. I'll move a bit to like skills needed for product management. Let's say I'm a university graduate. I just started my career, or I just graduated. And as we said, it has does have to be computer science. How can
Mm.
I, what skills should I focus on pursuing to land a product management role?
Yeah, this is a really good question. There's a lot of really good resources out there as well, by the
Yeah.
way. I really enjoyed Reforge. I took part in three to four of their courses.
Wow.
And it was really good because I learned some new stuff, but it was mainly helpful for me to help me kind of crystallize what I knew, and they had a really good framework for communicating it.
Hmm.
So I would say they're like the gold standard probably on like key product skills. Often you can get it funded by your company.
Reforge, you said. Okay,
Reforge.com,
I'll
yeah.
add the link as well in the
Yeah, and you can often
episode.
get it funded by your company as part of your learning and
Nice.
development. That one's really good. They cover a lot of, I did some growth classes there. I did some product classes. I was able to use a lot of their kind of fundamentals to communicate to my team how we
Hmm.
should maybe improve some processes, how we can look at things like, you know, calculating retention funnels, calculating acquisition funnels. A lot of these things is just like they have a really good way of formalizing.
Nice.
So, essential skills, I'd say the most important skills for a product manager or future product manager
Hmm.
is communication skills. It's understanding customer problems and being willing to actually go out and speak to customers and listen, not just talk to them, listen to, the problems and their underlying problems. Often the problem isn't what they say it is, but it's, one level deeper perhaps.
Mm.
Um, you need to if you want to be a technical product manager, there's loads of different types.
Yes.
If you want to be a technical product manager, understand how software is being built.
Mm.
You don't need to know how to code. It doesn't hurt, but you just need to understand how the software is being built, because you'll spend a lot of your time working with engineering,
Yes.
or building roadmaps with your engineering counterparts, building up the sprints, estimating work. Your engineering counterpart will be doing the majority of the estimation, but you need to kind of understand it and prod back a bit if the estimations don't quite make sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you need to be really good at influencing without authority. So the communication skills and the influencing kind of go a bit hand in hand. You need to be really good at, getting people on your side,
Yes.
setting people to march towards the same goal, convincing leadership that you're working on the right thing, making them see that you're making progress on the right thing, and horizontally influence other product managers to get their
Hmm.
teams to also build things you need for your product to get launched. Because often, everyone has a suite of products. There's never enough people. So you need to kind of convince people that they're doing the right thing. So I think those are the main ones. A
Yeah.
lot of these you can develop in any kind of role. Listening, especially,
Yes.
be nice, listen to people, and then good ideas can come from anywhere.
Hmm.
Don't just limit yourself to ideas that you came up with. Often some of the best ideas will come from, one of your engineers has spotted something, one of your data scientists, one of the junior people in the room might have a really good idea. They come in with new, fresh eyes. So
Hmm.
don't be afraid to listen. And then, build on the ideas and make it good together. Because like the seed of an idea is such a small part of it actually becomes a final product. You
Hmm.
might go through like 14 iterations before you even start coding. Um, and then you probably go through some more iterations when it hits market, or you do some user testing. So yeah,
Yeah,
be open-minded.
I agree. I think two quick things I can add here maybe is we're always surrounded by products, whether it's like our apps on the phone or
Mm.
actual products we use.
Yeah.
So always think of, oh, how can this be improved? Why do
Mm.
people use it in the first place? I think these can help you in the interview.
Yeah.
A book that really helped me is there's a book for
Yeah.
engineers called Cracking the Coding Interview. They did a
Yeah.
similar one to Cracking the PM Interview.
Oh yeah, that one's really good.
It's
Yeah.
a very good book that like makes you think of everything as a product and why do people use it and how can it be
Mm.
improved, as simple as like a pen
Yeah.
towards a app or something a bit more complex. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think these are two tips I can add.
Yeah.
Um,
And
sorry.
almost every interview will ask you, what's your favorite product? How would you improve
Yes.
it? Or what's the product you don't like? How would you improve it? Or why doesn't it work? So, if you're doing any interviewing, I often, you know, write down maybe three products I like,
Yes.
three products I don't like, both in terms of software products and in terms of non-software products. Because then you've done some thinking in advance, and they'll often ask you, tell me how you would improve it,
Hmm.
and why would you improve it that way? Why do you think you haven't done it yet? These questions pretty much always comes up.
Yes.
So that one's a really good one. Definitely do that. And it's also good learning for yourself as well. Some people even, start their own little like blogs or these
Hmm.
things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not necessary to do it that much, but like at least do it for yourself. And then another one is there's another really good framework called Jobs to be Done. You can find some books about it. You can find some like free ebooks about it. A job to be done is basically um, when a person wants to kind of meet the needs, for instance, like I want to be entertained.
Hmm.
There's like multiple ways of doing that, and you need to like look at both the first, second, and third order ways that can be met. If you want to be entertained, you might want to end up watching Netflix, or you might want to end up being on TikTok. But you can also be entertained by like going out and playing football, right? And they all take up that I have 1 hour right now to be entertained. So when you're looking at who's the competitor of a specific product, when you look broadly, I have a job to be done. I want to be entertained for an hour. Your competitors is anyone who can entertain that person for an hour. So if you're Netflix, your competitor might just be, another video streaming service. It might also be an Xbox, or it might be like a skipping rope,
Hmm.
or reading a book. And the same one that's probably an even better example was like, I'm a bit tired. I'm going to have coffee. So, if you do an analysis there, you're like, oh, as a coffee bean producer, my main competitors, other coffee bean producers, but they could also be one step further away. It could be tea, right, or Red Bull,
Yes.
or it could be going and having a nap,
Nap.
or
Yeah.
doing putting on a meditation podcast
Yeah.
and sitting down and doing meditation to relax instead. So you really need to like look broader than just like the immediate people in your market. Like what
Yes.
are other things that can be solving the same need?
Yeah.
That's a good one as well.
Yes, I really like that framework actually. Like people, you tend to just think a bit narrow and to say, oh, if I'm producing coffee, I'm competing with other coffee shops.
Yeah.
But It's true. I really like that. Um, let's go to more of the reflection mode. I think we've
Yeah,
talked a lot about your career and what you've done,
yeah,
and it's super, super interesting. And I think I'm sure a lot of young professionals are now exposed to these ideas of go and start your own thing, and maybe the pressure is really at its highest now.
yeah.
What what can you tell these young professionals or people who just graduated who want to really explore but feel intimidated by all this, you know, advice and people on LinkedIn, and you know there's a lot of apps and sources and media sources they're exposed to. What advice do you have for them to be able to explore more freely and not be affected by this noise, let's say?
Mm. Yeah, I would say there's probably two or three good ways to be exposed to many different things earlier in your career. One of them is obviously try to do internships
Hmm.
while you are in university to get some exposure, see how the culture is. Often that's a good way of just getting an offer immediately before you're even done graduating. So that's a really good one. A lot of graduate schemes are really good because a
Yes.
lot of them will send you across different teams for your
Hmm.
first year. Maybe spend like 2 months in one team and 2 months in another team. And it's a good way of like testing out different areas to see what interests you.
Hmm.
And then the third one is doing side projects.
Hmm.
Whether that is building software or starting a little like conference or
Yes.
podcast or blog or a volunteering group with friends. It's a good way of kind of getting exposed to a space,
100%.
and maybe like reaching out to experts in that space, to learn more about it. Because, you know, we both pick up a profession just like, oh, I'm a software engineer. But we also end up picking a field that we're interested in the end, right? You go into finance, you go into sustainability, you go into fashion. And then often you'll end up staying in that space for the
Hmm.
foreseeable. So if you are more passionate about a specific area, that can be a good place to start out. So you can become a domain expert in that field.
Yes, yes, no, I agree. And in terms of failing, because I'm sure when you try a lot, like you need to fail.
Mm,
I wouldn't even call it a failure, but you need to realize that or come to a certain point where you say, okay,
yeah.
it's time to do this different thing. So how have you dealt with, let's say, failure, or let's call them opportunities
Yeah.
in your career where you said, okay, actually, you know what, maybe it's time to stop building my startup. I want to go to Amazon, or I want to move from these tech roles to
Mm.
product management. Like, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, there's many different ways you can look at it. Um, you know, um, I don't think I'm not sure I would call it a failure as such, because no one hits every single thing they try. You'll grow by trying again and again and
Yes.
again. Even if you're like David Beckham, he won't hit every goal, or a tennis player won't win every single point in the
Mm-hmm.
match, but they'll win more than the usual. And I think maybe a way we can translate this to work is, be in a job as long as you're feeling like you're learning and growing, and there's
Mm-hmm.
more things for you to like do there, more ways you can add value to the companies that you're at. But if you feel like you're plateauing, or if you feel like your interests have shifted, maybe, there's a lot, the world moves really fast these days. So, a job that existed when you started uni might have changed, ended up changing a couple of years later, new jobs might have come in, new opportunities. And so as new things come in and your interests change, it's perfectly okay to, go after it and see if it's for you. And maybe it's not, and maybe it is. And so, as long as you keep growing, I think you'll end up going to a really good place.
Yes, yes, that's a great tip. Like, don't think of, oh, what could happen, or if I fail, what to have. More of think of how can I use this opportunity to just
Mm.
grow and learn. I'll
Yeah,
quickly go back to your career, and I think we're doing this interview like in the right moment where you just left your
yeah.
job at Amazon. Tell us a bit more about that, and how do you feel after, you spent around 4 years there, so how do you feel after leaving? Uh, and your
Yeah.
motivation behind
I
the
mean,
decision. Yeah.
right now I feel very relaxed because I've been on holiday for a
That's
bit.
good. That's good. It's good to feel relaxed after four
Yeah.
intense years, I guess.
But honestly, Amazon was such an amazing opportunity. It was a very difficult decision to decide to leave because we were definitely on the cutting edge of, generative AI,
Hmm.
especially, inventing completely new interface of how that looks as you mix it into shopping, into
Hmm.
existing apps that people use every day. There's so much opportunity there. We're just starting to see the beginning of it, really.
Hmm.
Um, but I was also working a lot with American-based teams because we were going back to the office, and
Hmm.
so I was flying out to Seattle or the US at least once a quarter, maybe more, and
Hmm.
working a lot of American working hours. And so I think now that I'm in my 30s, I was kind of looking more at trying to balance work and
Hmm.
life a little bit more.
Yes.
Um, and so I kind of made a decision that I needed to prioritize my kind of spare time a bit more.
Hmm.
So instead of working to like 8 or 10 in the evening, trying to find something where I can reliably finish within a normal European working day. And
Hmm.
so kind of what I'm looking for next is really to take all the, amazing things I've learned over the years and help European time zone based companies,
Hmm.
grow and scale. Because also when you kind of start to go back to office, being able to sit in the same space as your leaders, you're right next to each other, you can just have a chat. It's so much easier than if you have to schedule time to jump on a call. And so it's a really big benefit to be headquartered where your leadership is headquartered.
Definitely. And honestly, I think there you can bring a lot to the table from what you've learned, not just at Amazon, throughout all of
Mm.
this versatile career. So I'm sure in your next opportunity, you will even grow immensely, and you will help whoever you're working with to grow immensely, whether it's a product role or even beyond. Yeah, I want to really thank you for your time, Angela. Very, very insightful episode, and I've personally learned a lot from it. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of
Can't wait
course.
to hear how it turns out and also listen
Yes.
to all your future guests that come.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.